Hey, what's up, you guys? We're watching APS Amplifier, Paul here, and today I wanted to talk about the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG exclusive power tier. And what do I mean by that? Well, recently we got reveals for cards coming out this week in Maze of the Master. That's the sort of Odeon-based support cards. They're all about the mystical beast of Serket, embodiment of Apophis, kind of judgment of Anubis retrains, all of that stuff. And the reception to this archetype reveal was a little bit mixed. Some people were excited just because it's cool, Odeon's getting cards, that's awesome. But people sort of felt a bit lukewarm about the power level of the cards and the design. It seemed maybe a little bit simplistic and there's just not that much you can do with it. Maybe it's a little bit awkward. I saw people coming up with some really cool combos and interactions, but I think that it's well agreed that this is not going to be like a super duper top tier deck, but rather a fun kind of pet deck strategy that you can mess around with. And to be clear, that's okay. That's actually not exactly what I'm going to be complaining about per se in this video, but this is something that you actually see a lot with TCG exclusive archetypes. Just as a quick reminder, by TCG exclusive archetypes, I mean that these are the world premiere archetypes that show up first in the TCG territories before they show up in OCG territories. That's like, Japan and other parts of Asia. So some examples of those would be like recently the Mitsurugi, there's also Mimigul, Ashen, and Tistina are other recent ones, and probably one of the most infamous would be something like maybe War Rocks. And what a lot of these archetypes tend to have in common is that they are usually designed around a certain gimmick, and the visual design is oftentimes great and really cool. I think that Mimigul is a fun little like flavorful archetype that sort of is a play on the whole like, mimics that you might find in an RPG. And sometimes stuff like Ashen seems like it's inspired by Dark Souls. And so yeah, those are all really cool. The thing is though, the power level of these decks tends to be more middling. And I have my theories as to why this might be. Since these are TCG exclusive archetypes, I think, I can't be 100% sure of this, but I think based on some of my sources, that they are primarily designed by the TCG side teams. That's to say Konami North America, Konami Europe. I'm sure Japan has input on them and approvals and stuff, but they seem to kind of be designed by just a different R&D group or set of people in general. So they're not oftentimes going to be as powerful as some of the top tier decks we've seen recently, like your Snake Eyes or your Yubels, or even like stuff from Crossover Breakers, Ryzeal, Malice, and so on. And I want to be clear again, I think that's okay. I don't think every deck has to be a top tier thing, but it sometimes does seem to draw some lament from players that like, why do these TCG archetypes suck so much? And my theory on it is this. I think that the TCG exclusive archetypes that they design are meant to be extra flavorful, very, by flavor I mean, like inspired aesthetics and things like that. If you look at like Cosmo, it was a really old one. It was like Star Wars and Wizard of Oz, or Burning Abyss, right? Like just these cards that have like really creative inspirations. That's usually a big part. But the bigger thing is they seem to be the power level that I think maybe secretly, deep down, Konami, or at least some parts of it, want Yu-Gi-Oh! To operate at, right? Like when I was reading the Serket cards, the Odeon cards, I felt like I was reading cards that were kind of like just pulled straight from maybe 2010, 15 even. Like strong cards for sure for that period of time. But yeah, they focus a lot more on just like kind of basic removal effects, some powerful battle phase effects, like when this attacks, it can deal some extra damage to the opponent, or maybe destroy one more card after it destroys a monster in battle, or that sort of thing, right? Some basic recycling ability, a boss monster that can maybe come out of the grave, but like, there's not a huge focus on like generic extra deck stuff. There's not a huge focus on getting like loads of warm bodies out on the field, like what a lot of your modern sort of top tier decks do. There aren't as many of the other top tier creature comforts that they oftentimes get, like the sort of like lots of free searches, lots of recursive advantage, some card that maybe somehow like cheats targeting or cheats, whatever. It just doesn't feel like it's something that's as overwhelming. And oftentimes you even see it in like sort of the anime designed archetypes where they'll be like tied to one card, Millennium Ankh, Shining Sarcophagus, they all kind of cut from that same little cloth. But still, they seem like a deck that would be a lot of fun in a Rivalry of the Warlords format. That's to say like a sort of pre-constructed mid-power level thing, or maybe a Heart of the Underdog format. If you've watched this channel, you can probably tell where I'm going with this. I think that what holds these archetypes back the most is the fact that there isn't really a format for them to be played in. Mimigul is really cool, and I remember, I was actually at the sneak peek for when they were first revealed. I think that was, Infinite Forbidden when Mimigul first came out, and they got the rest of their support in Rage of the Abyss. Yeah, I remember at the sneak peek for that, a lot of people were really interested in building Mimigul, just because it felt fresh and it felt different. It's like this flip effect based archetype, which we don't get very often, and it also is all about like, giving these flip effect monsters to your opponent and kind of forcing them to get flip face up, and that's a whole cool, fun thing. There's just not that much space for it in the modern game, and it seems like it would be so much fun in a sort of fun, like locals night pet deck format, but we don't have a pet deck format. And so as a result, it and Testina and Gold Pride and Ashen and everything else instead just find themselves being, once again, sort of just like feeling like pack filler. And that, I think, is a real shame. Now, don't get me wrong, I think that all these decks can win in some capacity. These decks could win at your locals. They can maybe even make a pretty big dent at a regional if you come really prepared and you have some of the best stuff, and they probably have to also be, powered up by having like some Charmies and Dominus cards or something like that. But, they can make it. It's not like it's impossible for them to win or anything. I'm not saying they're actual garbage liner cards. It's just that in Yu-Gi-Oh, cards are either broken or awful, and it's just rare that you find an in-between, because anything in between, there's just no space for it at all, really. Like, there's not like a format for that. So yeah, I have just sort of a hunch or a theory that like these TCG exclusive archetypes better reflect how Konami seems to maybe like secretly want to design the game sometimes. Like, there's just so many of them. I could go on with examples for ages. Plunder Patrol comes to mind as like a really good one. And I guess when I think about it, it's just a little bit tragic and a little bit sad, because these seem to be the archetypes that the average kind of like more casual leaning or mid-core, or whatever term we want to use, player gets drawn to. Like, I'm sure that there are some people who like Ryzeal and Malice for their aesthetics, especially Malice. It's pretty cool. But like, Ryzeal's kind of generic stuff. Like, they're fighter, robots, whatever. But like, they play like sprites. They summon each other out a lot, and they're good. And like, they have a boss monster that's like a super Zodiac Trident. Like, it's, I think that people would rather play something like Mimigul, or play something like Mutants, or, something that just has a more fun gimmick and a fun like pet decky effect. But there's just not that much space for these things to exist. And I really do think Konami would do well then to at least consider finding some sort of a format, or when I say finding, I mean they can make it. Making some sort of format where these are the only decks that you can play, or they're, part of a pool of decks that you can play. I guess, as always, like there are half measures. There's Rivalry of the Warlords. They play that at like, Comic-Cons. They play that at YCS events. So they could technically have that be a thing. Maybe distribute deck lists to locals so that, people could build around these specific like Rivalry of the Warlords deck lists and power levels. And there is still Heart of the Underdog. It exists. So there's that. But yeah, before I get too much more like bitchy and negative about the whole thing, I will say that I think that TCG exclusive archetypes are designed really well. I think they're really cool. I'm glad that they exist, and I like building some of them even myself. I think that all the Maze sets have done a great job with the flavor of the designs. Like Flame Swordsman last year, super cool. Gate Guardian, also really cool. The fact that they managed to turn that into like a functioning archetype at all is great. But yeah. That's pretty much it. I want to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on my little theory, or how you feel about the power level of the TCG exclusive archetypes that we've been getting. Yeah, let me know down in the comments what you think about it. I'll see you guys in the next one. Oh, also subscribe to the channel if you like these sorts of discussions, because we're almost at 100,000 subscribers. I would really appreciate getting a silver play button. All right, cool. I'll see you guys in the next one. Pass turn.